G'day everyone. Today we're diving into a fascinating topic that has captured the attention of scientists, health professionals, and everyday people around the world, and it's blue zones. What if living to 100 wasn't simply a matter of good luck or good genes? What if where we live, how we connect with others, what we eat, and how we approach life could dramatically increase both our lifespan and our quality of life? To help us unpack this incredible subject, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Ferghal Armstrong, addiction medicine specialist at Turning Point, Box Hill and in Melbourne. Dr. Armstrong brings a wealth of medical knowledge and practical experience in helping people make lasting lifestyle changes that improve health and well-being. Welcome to Monday Matters. I'm Ian Bunston. Welcome, Ferghal. It is great to have you join us again.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Thank you.
You are our most popular and most common appearing guest on this program, Ferghal.
Oh, that's an honor I hope to maintain well into the future.
No, you're the one. You are definitely the one. Ferghal, for those who have never heard the term before, what exactly are blue zones? Where are they located and what makes these communities so remarkable?
Right. So the blue zones are parts of the world where there are more than expected number of centenarians. So there's more people who reach 100 years old than would be expected according to the background population. They're overrepresented. And these areas include Barbagia in Sardinia, Icaria in Greece, Loma Linda, where the Seventh-day Adventists live in California, Okinawa in Japan, and Nicoya in, I think, Puerto Rico, Nicoya in Puerto Rico. So in these areas, there are more centenarians. They've got the highest number of centenarians. And so people have started researching what might be the common factors that explain this overrepresentation, and can we then take lessons from those common factors into our own lives to then improve our longevity? Now, the first thing I would say about the blue zones is that these places are not affluent areas. You know, Barbagia in Sardinia is not like London, Paris, New York. And they're fairly rural, right? So it's not about financial affluence. That's not one of the key features of these places. So it's that gives me hope, because I believe that society is getting it's getting tougher, and for some people it's all about the money. And this is a perfect example of how money doesn't buy you happiness, and certainly doesn't buy you longevity. The question is, what are those factors?
Yeah. So in that regard, what makes these communities so remarkable?
Well, the remarkability is the fact that we've got so many centenarians. Question is why? Now remember, these are just association studies, and we'll have to unpick some of the association studies, and some of it I disagree with, right? In particular with regards to the health benefits of red wine. But let's identify the common factors in all of these blue zone areas. Number one, they exercise. So they move, they have purposeful movement. So they don't sit in the office on a chair all day. They don't get into an expensive car and drive to and from work. They don't sit in front of the TV all night. Their lives are full of purposeful movement, including things like walking to the shops or walking to see a friend. The next thing is that they have a predominantly vegetarian diet. Now, a lot of places are on the coast, so they eat a lot of seafood, but predominantly it's a meat-free diet. Now, again, we need to look at meat-free and whether or not that is associated with harm or not. The next thing is that they have a life of purpose, right? And if we think about purpose, you can either make money or make a difference. And in these places, they're all about making a difference, right? Because if your purpose in life is to make money, well, you'll never have enough, right? You'll forever be, a hungry ghost, as Gabor Mate would say. The next thing is that they're not overweight. So they practice moderation, in their diet. So we need to think about hara hachi bu, which is a particularly Japanese or Okinawan phrase, which means eating in moderation, loosely translated. They know how to relax. So again, this archetype of you've got to be busy all the time to succeed, that's actually bad for your health. So, actually having deliberate downtime away from your phone, away from modern technology is important. They know how to they eat together en famille. They sit down together at meal times with everyone, multi-generational eating together at the same table. They know how to be part of a family. And not only are they part of a family, and not only do they connect well with family, they also know how to connect with a higher cause or a higher grouping. So they might feel part of a family, but they might also feel part of a church or a movement or a charity, something greater than themselves. And so they live a life of service to that greater good. These are all factors that have been identified in various studies that look at the blue zones. And I think that, these are all common factors in our lives. We all should be living like this, especially when you consider how we lived in kind of caveman times in the paleo era. I don't agree with paleo diets per se, but I do agree with the paleo lifestyle because it was all about purposeful movement, living together, cooperating together, socializing together, sitting around a campfire, gossiping. Our frontal lobes, this is the part of the brain behind our foreheads. Our frontal lobes are what separate us from other species on God's earth, right? And our frontal lobes are primarily designed to sit around a campfire, gossiping and telling stories. How many of us do that? Do we sit around the campfire, gossiping and telling stories?
Yeah, okay. Now they've given us lots of good ideas there. What about the 80% rule? Can you tell us?
Yeah, right. The 80% rule. That's hara hachi bu. So in Japan, I mean, this is the thing. Obesity in Japan is not really a thing, right? For two reasons. One, they eat a lot of vegetables and fish. Right? And you ask a Japanese boy, what's your favorite food? They'll say broccoli. You ask an Aussie boy, what's his favorite food? He'll say Twinkies. And there's a significant difference. So they've been educated to eat well from birth. But they've also got this thing where you stop eating at 80%. When you're 80% full, you stop eating. And the reason why that's important is that it takes about 20 minutes for the full satiety signal to come to the brain. So if you deliberately stop eating it when you're 80% full, so that means you have to listen to your body, first of all. And it's actually quite hard to work out when you're 80% full if you've never done it before. You got to listen to your body. And then when you get to that realization, you stop. And at that point, you might want to have a cup of tea or coffee or a glass of water, and you slowly sip that. And after 20 minutes, you'll realize, well, actually, I'm very full and I don't want any more food. Most people in Western civilizations wolf their food down quickly on their own at a desk, stressed, meeting a deadline, and it's usually junk food. And they finish their plate irrespective of what of this 80% full. Now, the problem with eating junk food, right, is it destroys the signal to tell you that you're 80% full, right? So you don't even know, you can't actually listen to your body. If you're eating a pizza, I sometimes crave, hot pepperoni sliced, greasy, oily cheese, pecorino pizzas. Oh. But if you're eating a pizza, because it's full of emulsifiers and junk and all this other processed crap, it doesn't allow your gut to send the signal to your brain that you are 80% full. So even though you might be listening, am I or am I not 80% full? That signal is delayed. So junk food knackers the hara hachi bu principle. So it's dependent on the right kinds of food, and it's dependent on eating mindfully in a relaxed environment with friends, and then being able to say, I've had enough, I'm 80% full, sit back, push the plate forward. Doesn't matter if there's food on the plate, push it forward, sit back, have a glass of something, and within 20 minutes, you'll be stuffed. And that's how you moderate your appetite for health. And that's what most Japanese people do.
Mm. I can resonate with that, with the junk food, having fish and chips sometimes. And at the end,
Yeah.
I think, why did I go and eat so much of that? But anyway,
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn and put it into place, Fergal. Now, you mentioned before about faith communities and also service or
Yeah.
volunteering.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because both of those areas within our society currently are taking a dip. Less people wanting to volunteer, less people attending faith communities. Can you just dig down a bit on that? What are your
Yeah.
insights on that?
Right. So the most studied faith community that I'm aware of is the Seventh Day Adventists that live in Loma Linda in California. Right. Now these people are vegetarian, if not vegan. Right. But the interesting thing is, when you look at them, they all live to over 100. So there's, on the face of it, a lot of evidence to suggest that it's the diet, right? It's because it's the vegan diet. Because when you compare Seventh day Adventist vegans with standard American meat eaters, there is a significant difference between the lifespan of the standard American meat eater versus the Seventh day Adventist vegan. The Seventh day Adventist vegans live longer. So we all thought it was the veganism, right? And that's one of the studies that was actually used to say veganism is good for you. When they compared Seventh day Adventist vegans with non Seventh day Adventist vegans who didn't have that faith, there was also a significant difference in the lifespan. So they realized it wasn't the veganism, but it was the Seventh day Adventism that was the key. And so when they looked at Seventh day Adventist lifestyle in particular, they saw that it was a life of faith, it was a life of community, it had a certain philosophy of volunteering and giving to their community, and they didn't drink and they didn't smoke. So it's very difficult to separate out one key element of any lifestyle and say this is the key reason why people live longer. It's almost, in fact, it's impossible. These are all association studies, so there's no actual intervention study that can prove causation. So all of these epidemiological studies are associative. So you get a bunch of people with a bunch of habits, and they are associated with a certain outcome. Does not prove causality, and that's a perfect example. When we go on to the subject of faith and giving, we know, I mean, look, I speak from the lens of addiction. I know that faith and giving and volunteering are highly protective against addiction. And if you're in recovery and if you have faith and if you volunteer, you increase the quality of your recovery and the likelihood of long-term abstinence. Because of two things, I believe, two reasons I believe. First of all, it's the community support. And secondly, it's your relationship with a higher power, with God. Both of these factors improve your life. And I like to use the letter L for life, because it's L. It's a relationship upwards and it's a relationship horizontally to all the people around you. Now, stop me if I'm riffing, but let's talk about another interesting thing about veganism, right? It used to be said that veganism or vegetarianism was much better than meat eaters. What we now realize, actually, that's not necessarily true. So back in 1958, Ansel Keys published the first paper of the seven country study, and he basically said that saturated fat was bad for you, right? Or fat was bad for you, and we need to replace fat with something else. And what do you do when you replace fat? Well, you replace it with sugar or refined carbohydrates. And what happens when a society shifts from a kind of a traditional diet where there is meat and fat to a diet where you replace that fat with carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates and sugar, 20 years later, you get a massive outbreak of obesity and type 2 diabetes. And that's exactly what happened in the States. We now know that saturated fat does not increase mortality. I'll say that again. Eating butter and the fat on a steak does not increase your mortality. We know that it does increase the likelihood of having a heart attack if you are at risk of having a heart attack. But if you are not at risk of having a heart attack, if you live a life of moderation with community and you don't drink and you don't smoke, you don't have high blood pressure and you move purposely and you have a predominantly plant-based diet, but yes, you have a steak on a Sunday, that does not increase your risk of a heart attack. All right. And this was completely new to me. This is new to me in the last 6 months, this research. I didn't realize this. So what we need to think about now is not the fat is bad. We need to think about the quality of the food that you're eating. And I think I'm going to say something that I want everyone to remember. If you're going to eat meat, don't eat too much chicken. Don't eat too much pork. If you're going to eat meat, eat lamb and beef that is pasture-fed only. Pasture-fed lamb and beef concentrate omega-3s in their tissues. And so when you're eating meat, you're eating a lot of omega-3. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory, and that's what you want. You want to reduce the inflammatory component of your diet. The problem is if you go to Coles or Woolies or one of the big supermarkets, they'll say, yeah, it's pasture-fed, but it might have been pasture-fed for the first 3 years of its life. But then it gets finished in a feeding lot. And within 6 to 12 weeks of living in a feeding lot being fed grains and soybeans, that animal turns its tissue from omega-3 rich to omega-6 rich, which is very inflammatory. So it's got to be slaughtered from the pasture. So high quality slaughtered from the pasture beef or lamb is okay. But chicken and pork, even if it's free range and on the pasture, it's got a very high inflammatory component. So I don't eat it. The other thing I eat is line caught salmon. That's very rich in omega-3 and it tastes divine. I've never tasted salmon like it. It's the only salmon I will eat now. It's line caught. It's not farmed. It's wonderful. So these are a couple of things that we need to think about when we're thinking about the blue zones. It's not just about being a vegetarian. It's about eating high quality ingredients in moderation and in the right balance. Only a quarter of your plate should be protein, but it should be high quality protein.
Now, Fergal, I'm on dinner tonight, and I am actually cooking salmon. So where do I get the salmon that you mentioned?
My wife orders it from a butcher supplier online and gets it delivered. It's quite pricey. But this is the thing. I'd rather have a small amount of high quality, perhaps more expensive protein than I would than eat the crap that you get from an easy supermarket. To be fair to the supermarkets, though, there's one thing that they do get right. If a supermarket says that a food is organic, then it really is organic, because the standards of inspection that they have to go through to advertise food as organic means it really is organic. So I would buy organic vegetables from the supermarket, and I'd also buy frozen vegetables and fruit from the supermarket. And frozen food is cheaper, and it's just as good for you. So I'd offset the cost of the fresh meat and fish by buying frozen. And also, I'm very happy to go to the supermarket and get organic.
It sounds, Fergal, like maybe in your future work you might be launching into a foodie kind of eating show. Do you think that's going to be one of your next?
Well, I think it's something we should seriously think about working.
Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, you're an addiction medicine specialist, so you understand how difficult and challenging it is for people to change long established habits. Okay.
Yes.
Now, we won't go to the hole-in-one example because I know we talked about that several times, but it's easy for us to talk about this today and talk about, the blue zones and the various qualities of these, but how can we overcome some of these really long-standing unhealthy habits?
Yeah. Look, I think one at a time. You can't turn an oil tanker around immediately. It takes time. The key thing is to start thinking about making small, but incremental changes in the way that you live. And over time, you will accrue those benefits. You will accrue the benefits of the lifestyle associated with the blue zones. So, there's a couple of things you can think about doing. I've gone on about high quality protein. That's really important, especially if you're over 60, because when you're over 60, you lose muscle mass. And so you actually need to eat, relatively speaking, more protein than you did when you were in your 20s and 30s. So, eating high quality protein, eating high quality vegetables, one at a time, and then thinking about purposeful movement. Try and go for a walk for at least 15 minutes twice a day outside. Try and connect with nature. Connecting with all of these areas in the blue zones, they're not in cities, they're in the countryside. So they live in the countryside and they connect with the land. The land is healing. The land has healing potential. Think about connecting with friends, making a deliberate effort to phone a friend and meet up physically, not just, on FaceTime, but physically meet up and hug your friends and, shake hands with them, touch them. That physical touch is really important. One thing I will say, again, from my point of view as an addiction specialist, a lot of people will say to me, "Oh, what about red wine?" The 7-country study actually demonstrated that people who drank less than 2 glasses of wine a day lived longer than people who drank more than 2 glasses of, sorry, let me get this right. People who drank 2 glasses of wine a day lived longer than people who drank less than 2 glasses of wine a day. So effectively, the abstainers didn't live as long as people who drank what they defined as moderate alcohol consumption. And they put forward this idea that certainly in Sardinia, in Barbagia in Sardinia, they put forward this idea that it was because of the specific type of wine called Conanau. Conanau red wine is full of nutritional vitamins, supplements, and polyphenols that they thought kept people alive. So, red wine was good for you. And if you look at the Mediterranean diet, they will say red wine is part of it. A glass of red wine a day keeps the doctor away and all that kind of stuff. That research is flawed because, first of all, it fails to take into account the sick quitters effect. So people who've been told by their doctor, if you don't stop drinking today, you're going to be dead tomorrow. Well, some of them actually quit. And so they are abstaining. But they are already sick. So they will die younger than people who are not sick, but who continue to drink 2 glasses of wine a day. So that is the sick quitters effect. Now, more recent genetic evidence from trials called Mendelian analysis, or Mendelian relationship analysis, has demonstrated that there is absolutely no benefit to the consumption of any wine, any alcohol. So if you're going to drink alcohol, but do not think that you are contributing to your health. Any amount of alcohol is toxic to the body. It's poisonous to the body. I'm sorry to break it to you. The benefits of red wine just aren't there. I think you have to drink half a glass of wine a week to get the actual benefits of red wine. And if you can go a week and only drink half a glass of wine, you may as well abstain and get your polyphenols from berries, which are non-alcoholic. So, to answer your question overall, little by little, just choose one thing that you can do to improve. And then the next week, maybe do a second, and then the next week, do a third. Now, the question then becomes, well, how long do I have to change for it to become a habit? Now, again, this goes back to Japan. They have the theory of kata, which is any change in your behavior has to be embedded by doing it for 100 days. Now, neuroscience says actually maybe 66 days. So I want to emphasize the point, change your life in a week. This is what Tony Robbins says, in his motivational books, change, healthy habits in 1 week or healthy habits in 28 days. It doesn't work. It's at least 66 days, and traditionally it was 100 days. So get these behaviors done for 100 days and it'll just become routine for you.
Fergal, I've got to well, I'd like to touch on the benefits of the social connections just before we finish up
Yes.
today. Can you, I mean, I know that women are much better at quickly picking up that phone and making that arrangement to get together. Men are happy to receive that call, from what I understand from the Movember research, but are more reluctant to actually make the call. But can you just explain to us a little bit more what's happening psychologically and physiologically when two people are actually meeting together face to face over that cup of coffee or meal or whatever, or walking in the park for that matter?
Yeah, yeah. Any discussion on loneliness and social isolation has to reference the Harvard study, started in the 1930s. Now, the lead researcher of the Harvard study is Robert Waldinger, and he is on record as saying that loneliness is worse for your health than smoking or alcoholism. Smoking 15 cigarettes a day or being an alcoholic. Loneliness is worse. So we know that loneliness kills you. Loneliness increases your mortality risk by 30% compared to age-matched controls. Loneliness increases your risk of depression, suicide, dementia. Think about that, dementia. Heart attacks, strokes, healthcare utilization, immunity. Loneliness decreases the quality of your sleep. Loneliness increases your infection risk. So the question then becomes, what's the underlying mechanism? And look, it's multifactorial. You can't pin down one particular thing, but you can say that one of the key hormones is oxytocin. Now, when you have a deep and meaningful emotional connection with someone, or when, let's say you have a problem and you want to get it off your chest. So someone says to you, "Are you okay?" Not on "Are you okay" day, which I think is the most awful virtue signaling. It's just trite. But on a day that isn't "Are you okay?" if someone says to you, "Are you okay?" and you feel safe enough to sit down with that individual and tell them really what's going on in your life, you will get a rush of oxytocin. But the magic of that is so too will the other person. So both of you, both parties in this deep and meaningful conversation will get a rush of oxytocin. And then you think to yourself, well, what are the benefits of oxytocin? Well, first of all, it mediates social connection. Oxytocin is the hormone that mothers have in their brains when they deliver babies. And what do mothers have to do for babies to survive? So think about this. For the human race to survive, mothers have to fall instantly in love with their children. Otherwise, we wouldn't survive. But not only does oxytocin give us that deep connection, it also confers significant physiological benefits to us, including wound healing. So you heal better if you're surrounded by love. That's why hospitals let visitors in. Yeah. Because if you don't get visitors, you have poorer surgical outcomes, you have poorer medical outcomes. That's why hospitals in Scandinavia let spouses sleep with their patients in hospital, because there's better surgical outcomes. Inflammation is reduced. Insomnia is reduced. So you sleep better if you're socially connected. You live longer. There's a longevity effect. You've got easier digestive function. It gives your heart a hug. Literally, it improves cardiac function. It improves muscle recovery. So if you're training and you're exercising, then or if you injure a muscle for that matter, oxytocin, social connection, will improve the recovery of muscles. And it reduces stress, and something I find interesting is it actually reduces pain. So there's this theory of the social buffering of pain. When a rat, this is what I don't like about experiments with mad scientists with white coats. They deliberately cause pain to rats, right? But if you traumatize a rat, it'll demonstrate pain behaviors, right? You'll be able to see that it's in pain by its behavior. Those pain behaviors reduce when another rat who hasn't been traumatized is put into the same cage. But what happens is that the other rat, the untraumatized rat, also assumes those same pain behaviors. And it's the same with humans. If we demonstrate sympathy and love for people who are in pain, that rush of oxytocin reduces the pain experience, the pain intensity. And that is called the social buffering of pain. And it's partly due to oxytocin. And that's why we have to socially connect, because fundamentally we lead less stressful lives and we live longer.
Fergal, our time has gone, and I do want to thank you for being our guest today and for your insights, your knowledge, but also how helpful it's been really unpacking this whole idea of what blue zones can offer. So thank you for being our guest today.
My pleasure.
To everyone listening, perhaps this week is the perfect time just to ask yourself, what's one small change that I can make today that my future self will thank me for? Thank you for joining us on Monday Matters. If you enjoyed today's conversations, please share it with your family and friends, because together we can build healthier, happier, and more connected communities. Until next time, stay well, stay connected, and keep making each day matter.